Hello and welcome to My Favorite Games, a podcast for game designers to geek out about games they like to play. Today, I'm super excited to host Nicole Amato. Nicole is currently the games outreach lead at Kickstarter. They've also been in the games industry in general for over a decade and have worked on dozens of games as a designer, developer, writer, and editor. I'm keen to get into all of these kind of areas if we can. Their first Kickstarter was for a game called Resistor, and I feel the need to have to pronounce it that way just because it's in all caps. And that was back in 2015. They hold a master's degree in library sciences from Drexel University and previously worked as a research analyst, helping to write books about economic disasters. So really light and fluffy stuff. They also own a ridiculous number of games. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
So before we get into your kind of background, I do this where I ask all my guests to bring with them like a game for the figurative desert island. Bring a game. You decided to bring 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games with you, and I'd love to dig into to all of them. But specifically, Crokinole was the first one that you highlighted. Tell me about Crokinole. First off, for anybody who might not know what it is, what is it, and why do you love it so much?
Oh my God. Okay, so Crokinole is it's like this big round board with a bunch of sections, and you have your own little discs, and you flick the discs, and you're trying to get the discs into the hole in the center, which my fiance horrendously calls the belly button, and I hate it so much because it's the grossest. So I was introduced. I mean, I knew about the existence of this game for a very long time, and then last year, my friend Matt Fantastic has like a birthday party every year at his shop in Connecticut, and they taught me Crokinole. Like I sat down with his friends and we played Crokinole, and I was so instantly hooked, like instantly hooked. And I kept insisting that they were making up rules as we went. Like, there's a rule that you're not allowed to get up. You have to sit in your seat, and it's called like they refer to it as the one cheek rule. One of your butt cheeks has to always be in the same seat. You can't like get up and move around at all. And I was like, you guys have just made that up. But I had so much fun. And then with that same group of people months later at another one of his friends' birthday parties, I remember everybody else was playing Blood Rage. And there were 4 of us who were like, what if we just want to play Crokinole? And then like what felt like 20 minutes later, everybody came upstairs from playing Blood Rage. And we were still playing. And I was like, have we been playing Crokinole for hours? And the answer was yes. We had just been playing it for hours. But it is beautiful and magical, and I love it.
And so Crokinole, you have this board, you have this little disc, you're trying to get it in, and then there are these little
Pegs.
Pegs. I guess if we're continuing with the metaphor, belly hairs. I don't know, but like so.
I hate it.
So you're welcome. So you're sending this disc along, and it's kind of like a bocce ball or a bowls, but on the on a tabletop version, and then you're going against each other. Is it for 2 players?
It's for 2 players or 4 players. So if you're playing 2-player, then you're just playing the person across me. If you're playing 4-player, you and the person across me are one team, and then the other 2 people
Right.
are at another team. And basically what we're trying to do is if your enemy doesn't have any discs on the board, you're just trying to go for the center. And if you don't make it into the center, your piece doesn't count. If there are enemy pieces on the board, you have to hit an enemy piece or else your piece gets removed.
And so when you describe it, it sounds very like relatively straightforward, but like what's special about it? Why do you think? Because it's quite popular, and whenever you go to like convention, you have like tournaments, and you have
Yeah.
and it's not a small thing. Like it's pretty big, big board. So like what do you think? Maybe putting your designer hat, like why is it attractive?
For me personally, I love dexterity games. I love games that have some kind of physical component, which meant that when the pandemic struck and everybody switched to tabletop simulator, I was miserable because my friends at one point were like, what do you want to play? And I was like, you don't understand. I want to play Avocado Smash. Like, I want to play games that I cannot play over tabletop simulator, you know? So for me, it's not just it's two things I really like. It's a dexterity game, and it's a dexterity game where you are like able to sort of build up that muscle memory. So like my for example, my fiance throws axes and he also throws knives. And I've tried both. And it turns out I'm really enjoying throwing knives. And I think part of it is I'm standing in the same spot throwing three knives. So I can throw one and be like, okay, I messed that up. I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. Throw one, throw one. When you throw an axe, you have to go get it and then come back and then reposition yourself. I also was on a skee ball league, and skee ball, you stand in one position and you just throw the same ball multiple times. So I think that's what I like about, yeah, I think that's what I like about Crokinole. You're like in the same spot. Whereas a game like Flick 'em Up, have you played Flick 'em Up?
Nope.
Flick 'em Up is really fun. It's you set up like a little like town and you're cowboys. You're like cowboys, and you know, you're shooting bullets at each other. So the thing that you're flicking at each other is bullets, but you've set up this like whole town. But like it's like you got to get up, you got to move around, you got to do this, you got to do that. And the same thing with catacombs. Catacombs, there's like a lot of moving and like a lot of like repositioning. Crokinole, you're on the same side of the table. You can line it up. You can vibe with those stupid pegs in the center and try to get around them. Like it's I like a game where I can sit in the same like spot and kind of like perfect the movement, if that makes sense.
Like it's not only a bit of strategic thinking in terms of how am I going to approach this. It's also like, as you say, it's has elements of sport where you can practice, you can get good at certain types of moves.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So have you entered into Crokinole competitions?
Not yet, no.
Not yet, but now.
No. My fiance bought me a Crokinole board last year for Christmas.
Wow.
Um, yeah, well, it was hilarious because he also does disc golf, which is another thing that's like
Yeah.
he says that he likes to throw things at other things. So he loves
There are
disc
things that
golf and he
sticks.
loves axe throwing. Yeah. And last year he was like, "Oh, I really want to get this bag. It's a bag that is for both axe throwing and disc golfing, so you can put axes and discs in it." And he like entered a competition to win one, and I was like, "Oh, I'll enter the competition also to give him more chances." And then I ended up winning like a gift card to the shop. And so I like messaged him. I was like, "Did you win the bag?" He's like, "How did you know that the drawing was today?" I was like, I won a gift card." So like a couple weeks later, he was like, "Hey, can we talk about something?" And I was like, "Sure." He's like, "I know you're gonna get me one of those bags. Can we talk about it so that like, do you want to ask me questions about what kind of bag I want?" And I was like, I desperately want to ask you questions. And he was like, "Cool, because I want to ask you questions. I'm going to get you a Crokinole board, and I want to ask you questions about like color and stuff." And I started crying because I was like, "Oh my God, a Crokinole board." But yeah, owning a Crokinole board is awesome and also terrifying because like I haven't bought any. You have to wax it. I don't know
Yeah.
if you know
It's a,
that.
it's a well, it's a wooden board. I mean, like
Yeah,
it's a thing. I did not know you had to wax it, but like I could imagine like you have to maintain it because it is, you know, from like a it's, you know, a bit of shuffleboard in there. There's a little, you
right,
know, there's a
right.
little bit of like all these types of things, and I imagine especially since it's kind of become a little bit like a competitive game that like they're probably relatively, you know, not strict, but like clear ways that you have to maintain it.
Yeah, I have a board that people have recommended I wax it, but other people have been like, "No, no, you should get gliss," which is like the like sand stuff that you keep on it. You know what I mean? So I'm like paralyzed. I'm like, do I buy both? What do I do? Yeah.
um, just calls for a second one, and then you can do a YouTube series comparing them longevity wise, and then there you go. You'll make your money back. So you mentioned there also during the pandemic you wanted to play Avocado Smash, and that was also on your list of games that you love. What's Avocado Smash? It sounds like a very chill, relaxed, you know, pensive, heavy mentality kind of game.
If you've seen any of the Ridley games, it's a Ridley game and it comes in an avocado. It comes in like a little plastic avocado. And it's, you know, if you ever played Egyptian Rat Screw, it's one of those games where you're slapping the cards in the center. So if the card you flip matches the card before it, you slap. You're also saying numbers as you're flipping. If the number that you say matches the number on your card, you slap. We got so into it, we bought extra oven mitts, and we forced everyone to wear oven mitts because people were getting harmed while we
Yeah.
were playing. So, but yeah, that's another game that
Incredible.
like I love that game so much.
And literally just because of is it more the theme, or is it the mechanics? Like, are there specific things about it, or it's just the fact that it's an avocado that makes you smile?
I mean all of the above, but I think the interactions, the absolute groan of defeat when someone has to take the pile in the center because you're trying to get rid of all your cards, and if you mess up at all, you take all the cards in the center. We also got really into a game called Slap 45 a long time ago, and that
Okay.
was Slap 45 is another slapping game, but it's a slapping game where you're all trying to shoot each other. So you're slapping and pointing at someone, and it is one of the like of the games that have had like the funniest interactions. I mean, I have video of my friends just absolutely losing their minds playing this game. Like it is still the year that it came out, we were like, this is our game of the year. And Avocado Smash evokes a lot of the same feelings that Slap 45 did.
Another one that you mentioned, or a couple other ones, you have like Hibachi, Slay the Spire, and Pandemic. These are all quite different.
Yeah.
Um, what 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 kind of games do you go for in general? Is it all over the place, or do you like more heavy or more lighter games? Does it depend on the mood? Like how do you approach your massive game collection
Oh
and
God.
building and adding to it?
I definitely say it depends on the mood. I mean, you know, I've played everything from, you know, games like Avocado Smash to like Kingdom Death Monster. So like Kingdom Death Monster is like dedication. Like you have to
Yeah.
like Twilight Imperium, you have to like book that on your calendar. But like, you know, I went to a board game cafe recently and we played Catch the Moon, we played Azul, and we played Tiny Towns. So like for me, I'll try any game once and then sort of like figure it out from there. I mean, I definitely have a soft spot for deck builders. I love deck builders so much. And I love video game deck builders and physical deck builders. Like I love Ascension, I love Star Realms, but then, you know, I love Slay the Spire and like weird games like Inscription. So when the Slay the Spire board game came out, we were very tentative. We were like, is this going to be any good? Do we want to spend a bunch of money on it? We've been burned by video game board games before. And then we played it this summer and we were like, we messed up. We messed up not buying this. We should have bought this. And so we bought it and now we play it. I mean, we are very much enjoying that one. And that one was on my Desert Island list. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to put one game or multiple games. That's why I put so many games.
No, you're right. You're okay. You know,
But
it's like what you definitely took the assignment and like um
have you played Slay the Spire? Are you familiar with it at all?
I'm so I like I've watched videos about it for a lot of these things. I've watched videos. I've never played it though. I have played Pandemic, but
Okay, it's so good. Yeah.
but not Slay the Spire.
Slay the Spire is it's a video game and it's very like dynamic. Like you're upgrading cards, you're changing things, and so they really stayed faithful to the video game. And like whoever crunched the numbers is some sort of mad genius because they changed the
Everything
scale
works.
of all the numbers in like a beautiful way. Like we were playing it, we were like, how did they make this work on a tabletop? And it's very, oh, I can't recommend it enough.
Well, definitely is on my list, and our local kind of board game shop here in Edinburgh, called Ancient Robot Games, has all of these things that suddenly my world has like just gotten like so much larger, and my wallet has gotten so much lighter as a result of it. But so when thinking about like these kind of games for from a design perspective, you've been designing games, not only board games but also RPGs for a while. Um, Talk me through that. Were you a fan first and then you started getting into design? Like, how did you, I mean, you also now work in, I mean, you work for, you work for Kickstarter, but specifically on the game side. So you, games are your life, right?
Yeah,
In more than ways than one. Talk to me how that all happened. How did you get into this thing?
sure. So I've always loved board games and video games. My family had like semi-regular board game night, and I played board games with my friends as a kid. And then we all got really into Munchkin in like my early
Yeah,
20s, which is such an angry backstabby game that we just loved so much.
yeah.
And I've always loved video games. And in 2008, I went to my very first Penny Arcade Expo in Seattle. And I was like, oh, right, I love this. I should be playing video games again. Played I hadn't played games for a little while, and then I watched someone play Katamari, and I was like, "What is this fever dream that I'm watching?" And then I got really into Katamari and, like, just, went to PAX, got really back into video games, and then I was like, "Oh, I love writing. Why don't I write about video games?" And so I started writing reviews of video games. I started working for, like, a website. I went to my first E3, which was mind-blowing. Um, and then I just got really involved in I was in Philadelphia at the time. I got really involved in the local video games in the video game developer scene. They met together every month. I met Anthony. We were playing. I met Anthony, who my late husband. I met him. We were playing D&D at a local board game store. It was his friend's shop, and we started dating. We went to the video game dev night together, and then in 2013, we had been playing board games nonstop. Like we played Pandemic, we played a bunch of games at the store. We played so many RPGs. I mean, so many. We were in so many RPG games that we started. I remember when we started playing Shadowrun Sixth Edition. I turned to him and I said, "Hey, I literally physically there's no more room in my brain to learn another RPG. I will play it, and I will just ask you guys if I can do the thing that I want to do, and you will tell me what dice to roll because I can't read another player's handbook." But we were at
Too many rules.
one
Small break.
yeah, exactly. Once a month at Dev Night, they had a game jam. And at the jam, we decided we were like, let's just make a board game. We can't make a video game. Let's just make a board game. And that was Resistor. We won the jam and we were like, holy crap, are we actually good at this? Can we do this? And then we showed it everywhere we could. We play tested. We built a list for like a year and a half, and then we launched on Kickstarter. So that was definitely the beginning of the journey. It definitely like started in video games. I was also doing narrative design for indie games as well, which was a lot of fun because I love writing.
Do you find that, especially RPGs and versus board games versus, let's say, narrative writing, are these tapping into different types, different areas of creativity, or do you find them all equally like scratching the same itches? I don't know if that makes sense as a question.
No, no, that's a great question. That's a great question. I think that they all scratch the same itch in a different way. Like I think that doing writing and editing for video games, like I was doing like heavy copy editing, so I wasn't just oh, this grammar is wrong. Like the first big copy editing job I got for a video game, it was like thousands of lines of dialogue, and it was written by someone for whom English was their third language, and his partner was dyslexic. So they were both like, "Hey, we know that this writing needs a lot of work." And there were a lot of moments when I was like doing the editing that I was like, "Oh, I need to look this word up because someone used a thesaurus to get to this word. So I need to figure out what word was the
What were they
original word
meaning?
that they were trying to, yeah." So that was great because that gave me a lot of creative freedom. And I have my degree, I have an undergrad degree in international studies. I got a second undergrad in English, and I have a master's in library sciences. And those all, like, library sciences is very much like systems and like UX and UI and design. So a lot of the stuff that I learned in library school has definitely helped me with game design.
I'm still very new at this, and coming into it, I've tried to be creative in the past in terms of writing, writing stories, writing a novel, or coming up with worlds, like world building and stuff. And then with board games, the I guess I wasn't prepared for the math to be so
Mathy.
mathy, but also but like frustrating. But it's the kind of frustration that you're like, we're gonna power through this, like versus other types of, I don't know, versus school math. And I'm like, I don't want to be near you. I don't know if that makes sense. And so it just,
It does.
but I always have to like gear myself up for that. And I guess maybe that's a difference between, I don't know, engineering, game engineering, and game designing, or whatever. It's clear that you are just creative, and you just go at go at anything. And so I was just curious about that.
There was one game that I got hired to do development on, and we got to a point where the cards were unbalanced, and we just stripped the cards down, put them in a spreadsheet, and then fixed all of the power numbers that way. And then years later, Anthony and I were working on a co-op, and Anthony was very much a game design by feel person. So if something didn't feel right, that's when he would fix it. But he wasn't like, he was absolutely not a math person. So we were working on this co-op game called Kobolds, and I was like, he was like, I don't understand. Like, it feels like some of these cards are so like imbalanced. And I was like, hey, let's strip them down, put them in a spreadsheet, and go from there. Oh my God. Like, there were 2 times that I thought that game design was gonna break us up. The first time was writing the rules for Resistor. It was the first time we wrote a rule book, and I was like, I'm going to die. And the second time was trying to put kobolds into a spreadsheet, because he was like, I hate this. This goes against everything I love about this game, and I do everything by feel. And I was like, hey, it comes, like, we're trying to make a crunchy game. Like, there's numbers involved here. We either need to hire someone, because that's basically development work. I was like, we need to hire somebody to fix this problem, or we need to figure out how to fix it on our own. So yeah, math be
So
mathin'.
Matthew Mavin. That's the tagline. You were building board games starting back in 2013. Then but more recently you've really just been focusing on RPGs. And you obviously started off with your first board game, with your late husband. Talk me through that kind of journey in terms of like going from board games, then focusing on RPGs, and now you're developing some board games again.
Anthony and I made Resistor, and then the next game that got picked up by a publisher was Laser Riders, which got picked up at an Unpub. And then IDW Games approached us and asked us to make one of the games in their Atari series. So we were like cracking away at board games. And then in 2018, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer, and we kind of like we kept working on games as much as we could, and then he passed away in 2021. And it's been kind of hard to get back to board games, mainly because that was something I did with him. And then last year I was like, somebody asked me if I constantly, people ask me if I know like any writers for RPGs, and my fiance does writing for RPGs. So I was like, well, I'm a writer. Can I try to do some writing for RPGs? So Wet Ink took a chance on me and let me write an adventure for Never Going Home. If you're familiar with Never Going Home, oh my gosh, Never Going
Sorry.
Home is no, it's no. I said, oh my gosh,
Looking it
because
up
it is
now.
like, it is dark. It is like, I did not. So they also make like Heckin' Good Doggos and Garbage and Glory. And so they were like, do you want to write something for Never Going Home? And I was like, sure. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh no, this is like a
Oh
very
yeah.
serious game. Yeah. So it's like, an alternate history, like World War One, where because of there's so much death and destruction, we open up basically a veil into another world, and all these monsters start coming out. And like, I love scary stuff. Like, I love horror comics and books. And so I was like, I mean, Mothership is one of my favorite RPGs. Mothership is absolutely terrifying. I don't know if you've played that one.
I've heard of it, but I haven't. No.
It's a game where you are rolling up multiple characters in the beginning because you're definitely going to die. And it's one of it's the only game I know of that if you're rolling initiative, you fucked up because you're going to die. Like, there's no way that you're going to live through whatever fight is about to happen. So Never Going Home was absolutely incredible to write for. And then they also hired me to do to write for Garbage and Glory, and I wrote a bunch of items for Garbage and Glory, which was just delightful. And I'm also working with Ninth Level Games. We're making an RPG called Wrestlemania Symphony of the Fight, and it is a Castlevania wrestling RPG. It's like a roguelike RPG, which we are just having a blast with. And yeah, I have started talking about and thinking about working on board games again, which has been tough only because like I have so many prototypes that I made with, with Anthony. And so it's been tough because it's like, do I want to revisit those old prototypes or do I want to start working on some of my own ideas? So that's kind of where I've been stuck, I think.
But most recently, and so the Boom Patrol is your kind of most recent kind of title, and that was a collaboration.
That was a collaboration, yeah. So that was Anthony and I made that one together. That was we Anthony came up with that idea. We were hanging out with Chris and Heather O'Neill, who are Ninth Level Games. They're the owners of Ninth Level Games. And Chris was like talking about making like a game on a single card. And Anthony was like, what if we made like a little tank? And the way that you move the tank is like it's dependent on this and this and this. And it was just all on one card. And then from there, he was like, what if we made these tanks and we had like moving turrets? And he made our original tanks are like, we cannibalized a bunch of those like panda boxes that you get at conventions that are just full of, their samples.
Yeah.
We cannibalized a bunch of those and he made a bunch of those tanks. And like the treads on the tanks are like little furniture pads that you use so that you don't scratch up your floor. And yeah, that was built from that. And it's also like lightly based on Kelly's Heroes. And then we showed it to Kurt Covert one night when we were at Metatopia. We had like pitched it around. We were kind of feeling discouraged. And then we were like, Kurt, can we show you our game? And he was like, yeah, are you guys available at like midnight tonight? Because I don't know if you've ever been to Metatopia, but it is madness. It's a all playtesting the whole time. It's all prototypes.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
It's all in the same hotel. So people are just playing games till like 4 a.m. because we're all just going upstairs when we're done. But yeah, Kurt was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to see it. Let's hang out at midnight." And when we put it on the table, and Kurt just started making tank noises when he was moving his tank around, we were like, "Did we do it? Did we find the person who's gonna make Boom Patrol?" Yeah, so it was awesome.
That's awesome. And so and so that came out or that's that went live on Kickstarter earlier this year, and now obviously successfully, and now it's available for pre-order. But are you working on new board games?
There is a board game that I have been thinking about. So basically, I kind of want to make a game about grief, and I feel like I can't figure out if it's going to be a board game or like an interactive role playing game or like a storytelling game. After Anthony passed away, I joined like a bereavement group, which is almost exclusively people who have lost their partners, and almost all of them lost their partners to some sort of cancer. It's definitely made my journey more tolerable because it's a bunch of people who understand what I went through. So I think that, and we like, there's one book that I read in particular. It's called "It's Okay That You're Not Okay," and it's got a bunch of like at the end of every chapter, it's got like, here's like a little workbook that you can do. And I was like, man, what if we did this as like a game? And I was thinking about it as like, it could either be like a group of people who all knew the same person who passed away, or a group of people who don't know each other at all and they just want to talk about somebody that they lost. And it's just like, I was thinking of it more as like, prompts where you can kind of talk about the people that you lost. But I'm just not sure how to. I have another friend who also wants to make a game similar to that, but the game that they're thinking of, they showed me some of their work in progress, and it was more of like, you're sitting at your loved one's deathbed, like, what questions do you ask them? And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I could handle that where I am in my like grief process. I feel like that would be, yeah, that's really intense. So I think I'm sort of stuck there. And then I do have another game idea. I have a game idea that I came up with a couple years ago that I've just never been able to sort of put down on paper. And that one's also been kind of bouncing around in my brain. sorry, you also said that games are sort of my life, and that's true. I was doing everything part-time. So when I started doing game reviews and was going to events and doing like, covering shows, all that was part-time. I was a secretary at Drexel University. And then I finished my master's in 2017. And then I worked for an economist doing research on economic disasters. So I did that for 5 years. And then I got laid off in 2022. And I was like, you know what? I don't feel like doing anymore this. I don't feel like having like a quote unquote normal day job and then doing games at night. So that was when I decided to only apply for games jobs, and I got the job at Kickstarter. And like, I do love the job at Kickstarter, but I travel quite a bit. So that has been, yeah.
I imagine it's a stressful job. I don't know. I know I've talked to you before. You are this outwardly presenting, really excited, extrovert seeming person. But when you're like, oh yeah, we're flying from this place to this place and then going to this place, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, like that just sounds. It's and I can't imagine, like, game designers are an interesting bunch at the best of times. I can't imagine what your experience is like interacting with them and trying to be helpful or trying to develop those kind of relationships. Like, does it give you energy on the game design front, or does it give you like, you know what, let me go and study economics in my spare time now, make that my hobby? You know what I mean?
I feel like it's lucky that I came from what I was doing, because Anthony and I, especially when we were like, when Resistor was going to be on Kickstarter, and then when we were like sort of like gearing up for Laser Riders to be on Kickstarter, like we went to a ton of events. I mean, there were times before I worked at Kickstarter that I was flying from one event to another event. So I think one year between the two of us, we went to like 27 events because we were just like we were just going hard. And I've definitely learned that I'm an ambivert. So I'm an
Right.
extrovert until I'm not, and then I crash. So I'll be like, okay, cool. Especially demoing games nonstop all day at like a PAX or something like that. Like, I'll hit a point where I'll be like, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom and cry and then wash my face and drink some water, and then I'll be good to go. And like, that's 100% what happens. I go and I just cry a little bit, and then I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm ready to party. The difference now is definitely when I was doing events before, I was demoing my own games, and I was doing a lot of playtesting. I was going to Unpub and Metatopia and other events like that, where I was just playing other people's games and constantly getting expired, constantly getting inspired,
For
giving
you.
a ton of feedback, getting a ton of feedback, learning a lot about my own processes. And the difference now is, when I go to events, I don't necessarily have time to playtest games. And that's a bummer to me. It's a real bummer. And I think one of my favorite things is not only do I get to meet the creators that I've, chatted on Zoom with, but I often at events do get to actually cut out some time to play their games, which makes me really happy and excited. So I think that that's, if I could do more of that, I think that would be the icing on the cake, basically.
Speaking of then Kickstarter and your first game and how you guys, launched back in 2013, you came up with this game idea, and then you've done what a lot of people do, which is put it onto Kickstarter. But you didn't finish on Kickstarter. So talk me through like what happened, in terms of that point, because I just think it's interesting. Yeah.
That was a wild experience. So we made the game in August of 2013, and we were like, what do we do? What do we do now? And so we just started going to, I was already going to events for media. So I was already going to PAX East, PAX West, going to interview people, talk to people, play lots of video games. And then we were like, oh, cool, let's start getting involved in the board game space. So we started doing like basically anywhere we could. We went, and if we couldn't get an official thing at the event. We would just set up at a table and attract people who would just want to play, whatever we were showing. And we did that for a year and a half, and we made a lot of friends. A lot of the friends that we already had recommended that we talk to people. So like wildly, I don't know if you know Jason Tagmeyer. He does Button Shy games.
I know Button Shy games, but yeah.
So wildly, I went to high school with him. We graduated high
Wow.
school together. Yeah. And so I asked him for a bunch of advice. And we were going to PAX West, and he said, "Oh, talk to my friend Christopher. It's this booth number." And we went, and, it was Christopher Bedell at Greater Than Games. And Christopher was like, "Well, I'm very busy, but I can talk to you for a couple minutes." And he talked to us for half an hour and just gave us so much crucial information. Later, we were like, that man was the president of Greater Than Games. Like, that man was serious business. And now he's like a friend. And it's just, so many people were willing to help. And I think it was that year and a half of people just paying forward the help that they got. And that just became our mantra. Like, anybody who needed help, we just helped them. We paid it forward as much as possible. And I think that actually set me up for the Kickstarter job, because I've done so much of what I'm doing at the Kickstarter job just for free. I've talked
Yeah.
to people about, Kickstarter, and like, I learned so much about manufacturing and, what I thought was going to be a crash course in shipping. And we launched on Kickstarter in March of 2015. And we were literally going to PAX East because we were in the Indie Mega booth. So we were like, we funded in the first 36 hours. So I was frantically packing our bags while Anthony was frantically writing an update and making art, because we didn't expect to fund so quickly. And we got to PAX East, and we ran into someone who represented Level 99, and he played the game, and he was like, I think this would go really well with Level 99's library of smaller games. Like, it's the same exact size. It's like a fun 2-player game. Like, you should talk to the owner. And like, we went through a series of conversations and with him and with our printer. And he was like, yeah, I want to publish your game. And we were like, holy crap, what? So we talked to a bunch of our friends, because we were like, is this a good deal? What are we doing? And multiple friends of ours were like, I would have published your game, but it felt like you were so determined to self-publish that I didn't want to, because back in 2013, 2014, 2015, you said Kickstarter, and a publisher was like, okay, they didn't want to touch you.
Yeah.
So we definitely had a very unique experience.
And since then, though, the games that you've been working on have been through publishers. You haven't chosen to self-publish. So like, talk me through that. Like, is there a temptation for like maybe one that you're working on now? Is it when you're thinking about new games, are you thinking about it from how am I going to pitch this to a publisher? Like, is that the kind of the thought process through it versus thinking about like getting it out on your own? Does that impact the kinds of ideas that you work on?
Absolutely. So I will say with Laser Riders, it was just absolutely, like, we made Laser Riders. The process of making Resistor and finding out how much more expensive it was to use tarot cards and how complicated it was to make that box. Anthony was like, next game is just going to be cards, and we're going to try to sell it to the game crafter. So he tried to make Laser Riders with cards and then shelved it. And then a couple months later, he remade it with like the like X-Wing like pieces. And I'm not kidding you, the first day we had it on a table at Unpub, we had a publisher say to us, hey, I want rights of first refusal. And I was so new that I was like, you want to say no first? What does that mean? And it was Greater Than Games. They ended up publishing it. And, then with IDW, they literally came to us and said, hey, we have these Atari licenses. Do you want to pick one and make it? Because you guys have sort of, typecast yourselves as making 80s games. We also made a game for Button Shy. And I think, we were definitely at a point where with Boom Patrol and with our game Kobolds, and we have another game called Kismet Dice, we definitely Kismet Dice is so beautiful, and I love that game so much.
It's
And
a
we
great
showed
name.
it to our friend. We showed it to our friend who like has worked for multiple publishers, and he played it. And he sat there for a minute, and very thoughtfully he said, "I think 100 people would want this game." And we were like, "Yeah." And he was like,
That's not a
"I
good.
think only 100 people would want this game." And
Yeah.
we were like, "Oh no, yeah."
Yeah.
So we definitely made games where we were always thinking about manufacturing, and we were also, like I said, we met at Anthony's best friend's board game shop, which was a huge resource to us when we started doing game design, because we went to them with our initial product ideas for what the box was going to look like for Resistor, and they were like, bad, 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 worse. You know what I mean? Like they were like, this wouldn't fit on a store shelf. This would look terrible. So we definitely lucked out with having access to people like that, because they were like really able to coach us through how we should be thinking about product design. And that definitely carried over to, I would say that it influenced some of the decisions we made, but we tried not to throw out any ideas because we were afraid of manufacturing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it. And are you, I mean, even not really thinking about your role with Kickstarter, but from a design perspective, are you still feeling that way? Like, if you develop, some of your ideas more, is your first protocol getting in touch with publishers that you know and seeing if something might be viable or might be of interest, or are you, do you think like, I really want to push this out. Let me start thinking about art, even though it hasn't
Sure,
been picked up yet. Does that make sense?
sure. It does make sense. I was also very spoiled because Anthony was the artist and graphic designer on all of our
Yeah.
projects. So I was definitely spoiled. One of the big differences between today and even, I would say even 5 years ago, is that you don't have to do everything yourself on Kickstarter anymore. Like, you can hire somebody to do the distribution, and you can hire somebody to handle fulfillment. And that wasn't the case in 2015. In
Yeah.
2015, it was very much, are you ready to have 1,000 copies of a game in your home? Um, the answer to that was absolutely not. That was the thing I was the most stressed out about, which is funny. But I think that today I think about things like, how could I make something that's low lift enough that I could put it on Kickstarter? So like, I think about RPG writing, and I think about stuff like the Grief game, and I think like, can those ideas fit into Zine Quest? Or like Make 100, or Micro Game May, or even Witch Starter. You know what I mean? Like, how can I utilize the things that I want to do and maximize visibility on Kickstarter, and also have it be low lift enough that, again, I don't have hundreds of copies in my own home.
Or at least you know if you're going to or not. That's a really interesting kind of uh, way of thinking about it. Are you collaborating with specific publishers at the moment, just in terms of or on like helping out with other projects that you're up for talking about?
Kobold is at a publisher right now, and I've
Okay.
been in touch with them. I have been talking to other publishers about the Grief game and another game that Anthony and I were working on. It's mostly just finding the time to work on the games, which I think is hilarious. But I think that I would love to, when I think about Zine Quest, that I get like a thrill when I think about Zine. Do you know what Zine Quest is?
Yeah. Again, haven't heard of it, read about it, but haven't partaken.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, and I think about a lot of the projects that I've seen, and like, even like, so my fiance Josh and I, he's moving in with me, and we just unpacked our office. So for the first time in my life, I have merged books with a human being, which is very insane to me.
Stressful.
Um, I was terrified. And
Anxiety.
I was married for 5 years, and
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. Like when Anthony and I put our books together, I was like, your books can be over here and my books can be over here. But Josh was like, let's put our books together. And I was like, what? What? You want to put our books together? Like touching? Like next to each other? So like together? But we unpacked all of our, sorry, the whole point of this was we unpacked all of our RPGs, and I have an unholy amount of zines. Like so many zines. I backed so many zines during Zine Quest. And also, like I said, I'm really into Mothership, and Mothership creators love making zines. They love making two things, zines and patches. And I really need like a fresh jean jacket just to put all of my Mothership patches on.
Bags, like backpacks or suitcases for your
I do
travel.
I do have a brand new backpack. That's also a good idea. I'm into this.
A suitcase full of zines with Mothership patches all over it. Sounds kind of like
Perfect.
on
Perfect.
brand. There you go. Cool. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for taking some time to share your experience and to geek out a little bit about Crokinole, Avocado Smash. I know we chatted briefly about like Hibachi, Pandemic, and Slay the Spire, of course. Um, uh, if anyone out there is interested in checking out Boom Patrol, Nicole's latest title, you can find the information on how to pre-order that in the description below. Nicole, thanks again for joining me and for chatting. This was great fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This was delightful.